When orbital sanding, laying on top of the workpiece, probably not the best method of choice. Nor is sanding at the speed of light. Just not going to get it done. Putting on your body weight, especially mine, really is not going to work here. Sticking your tongue out might work in other areas of life, but not when orbital sanding, especially tipping it up like an angle grinder. It doesn't have to be tiresome work.
Chris here with chrisTcross Crafts. If you're going to make something out of wood, most likely you're going to have to sand it. Well, there's a lot of wrong ways to do it that'll leave your finish looking bad. I want to show you a couple quick, easy techniques that'll make your next project turn out perfect. Even if you didn't build it perfect, at least it'll look perfect when you finish it. So a lot of times we're using hardwoods, sometimes we're using veneers or plywoods. They require two totally different operations. If you're dealing with a hardwood, typically you're going to want to start down around that 80 to 100 grit and then work your way up, usually to about a 180 to 220 depending on whether you're going to stain or just put a finish on top of it. And that allows you to get rid of the burnish that's created from the joiner or the planer and to begin to build that proper scratch pattern. So that when you do apply that finish or stain, that it gets even, clean, and comes out looking good. Plywoods or veneers, on the other hand, they have such a thin layer that it doesn't require as much of a cut with an 80 grit. Typically with a plywood, you can even get away with starting with, say, a 150. Generally, they're pre-sanded from the factory when you buy them. Unless you've done a lot of damage to them, they shouldn't require a whole lot of work. So 150 is a nice, good way to start here. And again, it's a very, very light cut, minimal pressure when you're applying the sanding. So hardwood versus softwood, choose the right grit for your operation. Otherwise, you could burn through that veneer in a heartbeat and you'd be hating life at that point. So the next thing to be aware of is what kind of tool you're going to need to do it. If you got a lot of heavy cuts on a big wide glue up and you know your surface is uneven and you don't have a wide belt sander or you don't have a drum sander, then you're going to want to go with this beast, a portable belt. You can go at a slight angle to start to get everything nice and level. Again, keep this thing moving. You don't want to stop or you're going to create dips. Or is it lighter work? If it's lighter work, go with a traditional random orbital sander. Whether it's electric, whether it's air, whether it's the traditional style or one that looks a little bit more like an angle grinder, doesn't really matter. The point is still the same. Make your cut light, keep your sander moving, and don't stop. Sometimes you may even be required to use a small little quarter sheet sander or in this case a 3x4. The difference is the orbit patterns and how they're going to sand. This particular one sands in a very, very slight orbital pattern. Some of these little quarter sheet sanders, they'll actually sand in a linear pattern. So depending on your needs, get the right tool for the job. But most of us, when we're doing general sanding, we're using the traditional random orbit sander. So if that's the case, choose the right tool, get the right grit for the material that you're sanding, and then go to work. Proper technique is important. You'll see a lot of times people will have the sander up on the edge like this, trying to get into a dip. All you've done is magnified that dip, and you may not know that until you apply your finish, and then you can definitely see it at that point. You'll also see people go at a super fast speed. And when that happens, with these sanders, it not only orbits, but it also oscillates. That's why they call it a random orbit sander. So if you're going too fast in your technique, a lot of times it doesn't allow the pad to properly rotate and sand the surface. That's when you're going to wind up with a lot of your little swirl marks, a little bitty trail of scratch. So other times you'll see people white knuckle the thing where they're bearing down so hard because they think the more pressure, the better it's going to apply. The problem with that is the more pressure, the more heat you build up. The more heat you build up, then the more it damages the fibers of the wood, which translates into a poor finish. So proper technique is just barely the weight of your hand. start with the sander on the workpiece when you turn it on. Always stop with the sander off the workpiece when you turn it off. Another thing you always want to do is overlap yourself by at least a third as you're making your pass. Generally, the best way to do that is go side to side or against the grain to start off with, making those even passes, and then coming back with the grain to kind of finish it out. Again, overlapping yourself roughly by a third. No matter whether it's a veneer or a plywood or a solid wood, the technique's still going to be the same. So no matter whether you're sanding a solid wood or a veneered product, the technique's still the same. Light, easy pressure, keeping the sander moving, overlapping by a third. Trust me, it'll change the way your projects come out. If you got any questions, let me know. Message me. Well, I hope this helps. It's time for me to take a break and enjoy a nice, refreshing, cold cheer wine. If you're from the North Carolina area, you know what I'm talking about. This is Chris with chrisTcross Crafts. Out.